Ever since Tony Ferguson dropped the term Dana White privilege, fans and fighters have been using it on the regular whenever someone's getting more attention than they deserve. This privilege is said to be given to some of the biggest names in the industry and is used more as a negative rather than praise. Fighters with said privilege include names like Conor McGregor, Brock Lesnar, Jon Jones, CM Punk, and more. Hello and welcome back to SBTB. Today we'll be entering the cage together to go over what Dana White privilege really is, as well as some of the fighters this mythical concept has been associated with. Before we continue, if you'd like to be updated on the latest news, fights, and fighters making an impact on the MMA world, make sure to subscribe to our channel as we release new videos on this channel regularly, and that way you'll be notified next time we do so. With that said, let us enter the cage, put the gloves on, and 3, 2, 1, fight! What is Dana White privilege? It's well known that some fighters do get better treatment than others within the UFC. This often gets fighters that don't get treated as well and on their fans to rampage against the UFC for the focus and care it has on money, but the lack of such care for its fighters. Dana White privilege is basically when a fighter who hasn't done his time yet in the UFC ends up getting title shots and headlines events and basically gets special treatment even though they've only had a few matches in. This of course angers fighters who have been in the UFC for a long time but still haven't had a title shot because they won't bring in as much money to the table. The term first originated at the UFC 262 press conference when Tony Ferguson, who had already had 12 consecutive wins but still didn't have a title shot, approached Michael Chandler, who got his first title shot in the UFC after only a single bout. Ferguson had the right to be angry without a doubt, and fans also feel the injustice as even if a guy like this becomes the champ, it doesn't feel earned, and at that point, what's the title even worth? Dana White himself was asked about it in the press conference, and he replied that it's a real concept, but it's hilarious. In fact, even when Ferguson said it, White started laughing his behind off, so it really is genuinely funny for him.
Hey, man, you said no, man. I'm going to be real. You got this handed to you. You got Dana White privilege.
Tony. Thanks, Dana.
He stated that he believes in making fights that will get the hype train going, fights that people will want to see. He says that most of the guys that whine about Dana White privilege are fighters who are just coming up with excuses for why they're not at the top. White says that this game isn't just about being sort of a good fighter and beating some small fries, that the real fighters go and take everyone on, and most importantly, they make a show out of it. From his trash talking to his fighting abilities, Conor McGregor is a star. Anyone butthurt about it should probably leave the UFC, says White. You have to keep in mind that Dana White is a businessman before anything else. He's a fight promoter, and he has to make sure that people will come to see the fights he's promoting. So he can't just get any no-name fighter and give him privilege. This is usually said for the fighters that really did generate a ton of hype, even from just their debut alone. So there are two sides of the coin here, and just as some fighters are getting more opportunities than others, they're also giving more value to the company in return. So it's not like Dana's just getting his cousin to be a new face of the UFC. You simply have to be the best if you want to be at the top, both in charisma and fighting ability. Or in other words, if you want to be the best, you got to take out the best. For all of you never back down fanboys out there. Now that we've established just what Dana White privilege is, let's get into some of the fighters that are the most privileged. Brock Lesnar. If you've ever watched the WWE, you've heard of Brock Lesnar. Brock has been portrayed as a monster in the world of world wrestling entertainment, and for good reason. He really is that skilled. That being said, he's been quite privileged since he entered the UFC, getting to the co-main event of the night of UFC 81 only after having a single fight in the company. He then lost the fight, but after just another win, he got a title match. So you can see why he would be called privileged. But that being said, we have to give credit where credit is due. Brock Lesnar has it. He has the charisma and the ability to sell his fights like none other, and this is a big part of the reason why he got treated so well in the UFC. As Dana stated, he's on the side of promoting fights people want to see. And if people want to see Brock Lesnar, that's who they'll see. Brock proved that he's the real deal by becoming the World Heavyweight Champion in the UFC, a title he's already quite used to from his days in the WWE. But yeah, you can see why he would be one of the Dana White blessed fighters. Number 4, Ronda Rousey. Since she's the real deal and managed to somehow back up all the hype she got, Ronda has gone a little bit under the radar with her levels of privilege. She had a ton of hype surrounding her even before her UFC debut, and thanks to that, she got the Women's Bantamweight Championship belt without the struggle. White explained that he did it because she was the first woman to ever sign in the UFC, combined with the fact that her record on Strikeforce really is quite amazing. In her case, nothing bad came out of the privilege, as she really did defend the title well a few times and managed to make herself in the UFC some real crazy cash while she was at it. The fact is, women's MMA wouldn't be what we know it to be without this little shenanigan, so we'll let it slide. Number 3, CM Punk. Another WWE wrestler joined the ranks of the UFC in 2016 and showed what happens when you get privileged, but can't really back it up. Punk is arguably one of the biggest stars within the WWE, with his mic game arguably being the best out there. He has millions of fans and his character is beloved. That being said, his actual fighting ability didn't really turn out to be all that special. Punk was called the best in the world, and in the WWE itself, he really was pretty good. But when he joined the UFC, it really didn't work out as well. His first fight was against Mickey Gall, and he lost it pretty badly, tapping to a rear naked choke in the first round. Now keep in mind that Punk was signed for 2 years before having a fight, and the hype generated for the fight was insane. Everything was looking as if Punk was being pushed to be the next champ, but he lost miserably, and then in his second fight, he lost again. The second fight was so bad, however, that Dana White removed Punk from the UFC on the grounds that this fight was just too hard to watch, and if he were to sell such boring fights, he'd go out of business. Being that these were pay-per-view matches, while some better fighters were in the preliminaries, it just goes to show how far the privilege can go. Jon Jones. One of the most controversial careers in the UFC is definitely Jon Jones's, but his privilege didn't come in the form of getting main events he didn't deserve. Not at all. Jones was already an established MMA fighter and had really great fights under his belt. The problem with him was that he got positively tested for Turinabol. Usually, if you're discovered to be on performance-enhancing anabolic steroids, you'd never be allowed to fight. But this is the UFC, and Jon Jones does get fans pumped up, so why not? He was then arrested and was still scheduled for a fight. He's had a bunch of reputation-breaking incidents like this, but he still keeps having his spot in the UFC, and that can be either commendable or just plain stupid. Make sure to tell us what you think in the comments below. And at the top of the list, Conor McGregor. And last but not least, we have the Irish champ, Conor McGregor. Conor's a wild card, and you never know what he's going to do, which often leads him into situations where he has to exercise his Dana White privilege. He's arguably the most privileged fighter of them all, as he's by far the biggest rock star within the UFC. But he surely has had his own issues concerning some of the situations he's been a part of outside of the octagon. He's been involved in the bus attack on Khabib. He's been allowed to fight Floyd Mayweather. He got into a fight with pop star Machine Gun Kelly and is an overall troublesome guy to handle. This, however, only adds to his reputation and character, and people want to see even more of him, which is perfect for Dana and the UFC. So even if they don't quite approve of these actions, they do help make even more money, so Conor's been more than forgiven for everything he's ever done. And now, well, aren't you lucky? It looks like you've been saved by the bell yet again. Anyway, this was it for the fighters with Dana White privilege. This has always been a thing, and while it's more subtle, you can probably recognize it in some other names too, like Hamzat, Patty, and a few others. It's not necessarily something bad though, as it does raise the standard of showmanship. Also, we love the UFC as it is, so we'll let it slide. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to let us know what you think about this so-called privilege down in the comments below. With that being said, we'll be taking our leave, so as always, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.